So here's a setup, right? ICE rounds up a bunch of gang members. Doesn't pay too much attention to who it's rounding up. If they have tattoos, if they're suspicious, if someone they follow that says a gang member, they put them in a plane, ship them to El Salvador. Before the plane reaches El Salvador to a high security jail, one of the nastiest maybe in the world, a judge says, wait a minute, none of these people had due process. You didn't document any of this. None of this was processed. You can't ship people out of here to an El Salvadorian jail without due process. Bring the planes back. ICE ignores them, lands the planes in El Salvador. They're unloaded in El Salvador and put in the high security jail. In the meantime, it turns out that several of the people, maybe up to 10% of the people on the planes in the El Salvadorian jail right now, are not gang members. Maybe it's more than 10%. 10% is probably what we know. They're all, though, illegal immigrants, with exception of one person, Abrego Garcia, who literally has an order from a judge saying he cannot be deported. He went through immigration court. He went through an asylum hearing. And at the end of the hearing, it says he cannot be deported. So he's got a document saying. Abrego Garcia is married. He has 3 young kids. And he lives, I think it's in Boston, if I'm not correct. I think it's in Boston. At some point during his immigration hearing way back, he was accused of belonging to MS-13. That was never proven. That was never the basis for the accusation. And indeed, the ICE was barred from deporting him because the judge viewed it as a risk to his life if he was deported to El Salvador because the gangs were after him, not because he was MS-13. Anyway, he was rounded up, and he is now in an El Salvadorian jail. Now, all this evidence was brought in front of a judge, and a judge basically said, you got to bring him back. He is not, he had there's a clear legal standing that prohibited you from deporting him. If we'd gone through due process, we would have discovered that, and you wouldn't have deported him. And the government is saying, no, yes, the government is saying basically, yes, we made a mistake. Yes, he was deported illegitimately. We shouldn't have deported him. But we can't do anything about it. Can't do anything about it. He's in El Salvador now. Can't do a thing about it. We're not going to do a thing about it. So this issue was appealed to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court came down with a ruling, I think it was on Friday or Thursday, 9-0. How often do you see that? 9-0. Basically telling the government, you got to bring this guy back. You got to bring this guy back. You got to facilitate his return to the United States. That's what the Supreme Court ruled. And so they told the judge in the lower court, you have to, hold the government accountable and monitor that they bring this guy back. Facilitate his return. Yeah, Edward, the Trump zombie, is going to tell us that there's a big difference between facilitate and effectuate. That's right. And that's the source of it. Anyway, they have to facilitate the return. Now, all facilitating a return would require is Trump telling the Trump administration telling the El Salvadorians, we want this guy back. And they would put him on a plane and he'd come back. So today, Bukele, the presidente of El Salvador, the guy who built these horrific jails, was in the White House. Scheduled meeting. He is a fan of Donald Trump, or maybe it's the other way around. Donald Trump is a fan of Bukele's. But at the end of the day, Bukele is a tin pot dictator of a tiny little country Trump is the president of the United States of America. And Trump could have asked Bukele to ship Abrego back to the United States. Very simple. And let me tell you, Bukele would have done it. Or he could have told him, let's delay. And Bukele would have said, I need to think about it. I mean, in other words, Bukele would have done whatever Trump said. Well, whatever happened in the private meeting, it was clear that something else was decided. That is, when they came out in front of reporters and Bukele was asked if he would facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia, he said, no, I will not. And Trump was sitting there with a huge grin on his face, just smirking, like, yeah, the guy's doing what I told him to do. This is so cool. What the Supreme Court going to do now? They can't force a foreign leader. Yeah, Supreme Court has no jurisdiction in El Salvador. But the U.S. government is basically saying, we will not do anything, to bring Abrego Garcia home. And the President of the United States is saying, I'm not going to do anything. Basically, the administration is saying the Supreme Court has no authority over foreign policy, and therefore we are going to ignore the Supreme Court. Now, here's the nightmare scenario. I'm not saying this will happen, but it could happen. As they're walking out, this is not the nightmare scenario, this is reality. This is actually what happened. As they're walking out, and he's saying goodbye to Bukele. This is the transaction was the conversation was actually recorded, and Trump says to Bukele, "I wanna put Americans in your jails, real criminals in your jails. So build more. You got to build at least 5 more huge jails. These are massive jails, hold tens of thousands. You got to bring 5 more because I wanna put Americans in your jails." Now here's a scenario. Let's say Trump is serious, only hardened criminals. But let's say a hardened criminal, somebody goes to trial and is found guilty of murder and is shipped off to a Salvadorian jail, which seems unconstitutional to me. But I don't think anybody cares anymore about the Constitution. Imagine that. And imagine a year later, DNA evidence is found that shows that this guy didn't commit the murder. And now you think, bring him back from El Salvador. And the president goes, "Nah, I don't think so. I'm not going to ask Bukele for that favor. Why would I ask Bukele? Let him stay there." And that's it. And there's no recourse. And nobody cares. And America just goes, "Yeah, I know he's innocent. Yeah, we shouldn't have sent him to the El Salvadorian jail, but let him rot. We don't care." Particularly, I don't know, if he's an immigrant, maybe he has darker skin or something that makes him unappealing to the powers to be. Or even worse, imagine that they just start arresting people and sending them to, El Salvador. And, once in a while, they rope into the rounding up some critic of Trump. And he's not a gang member. He did nothing. And they go, "Oh, yeah, sorry, that was a mistake. We didn't mean to send that guy to El Salvador. But he's there now. There's nothing we can do about it. So be it." I mean, this is sci-fi level American dictatorship is coming stuff. This is how bad it is. It's crazy. And what's going to happen, right? So the Supreme Court could now say, you are not fulfilling, right? We ruled 9-0. The Supreme Court could escalate. So Abrego Garcia's lawyers could go back to the Supreme Court, allege the administration has refused to comply with the court's order, and then the court finds that the administration did not comply. It rules again. It demands action. And then what? Would Congress then take it up and impeach the president? No. We know that wouldn't happen. Would the military, now led by Trump accolades, who he fired the military leadership and put his own people in there, would they back the Supreme Court and, I don't know, depose the president? It never happened in American history. Would it happen? No way. It wouldn't happen. If the court found the administration in contempt, would President Trump be arrested and put in jail for contempt of court? Would Secretary Rubio, who I don't know who's responsible, the head of ICE, would any of them be arrested? No. Not given who runs the Justice Department, not given who runs the FBI. I mean, the reality is, the scary part of this, I mean, I feel sorry for Abrego Garcia and his family. I mean, this is tragic and horrific. But think of the wider implications here of the rule of law. Think of the wider implications of an administration completely out of control, with no respect for the courts, no respect for the rule of law. Is there, I mean, where does it go from here? And it very could be that the court decides not to hear the case. Because it could very well be that the court decides, you know what? You know, is this the hill we want to die on? Is this the constitutional crisis we want to have? I mean, shouldn't, if we're going to have a constitutional crisis, it be over a bigger issue? Trump's going to ignore me anyway. I mean, Roberts might think that he got the unanimous decision. He now, ignores the noncompliance and lives to fight another day. There's nothing in American constitutional system that can compel Trump or can compel a dictator in El Salvador to do something that he understands the president does not want him to do. So Trump doesn't have to say, don't do it. He just has an understanding with Bukele. That smile clearly articulate that. And Roberts could say, I can't compel Bukele to hand over this guy. And I can't, so what? There's nothing I can do. Nothing I can do. Just think of that as you defend this president. Just think of that. I mean, God, I'm looking at a video of Bukele saying, how can I smuggle a terrorist in the United States? Of course I'm not going to do it. The question is preposterous. And Trump sitting there with this smug smile, nodding. This is sick. This is behavior of a unhinged man, an authoritarian. An authoritarian. And as we'll see, I think there's a pattern. The pattern is these guys are setting us up for a Orban, ultimately Putin-like, we have elections, but they don't matter type authoritarianism. That's certainly what it looks like. I hope I'm wrong. But last time, 4 years ago, we had January 6th. Next time, they're not going to be that polite. They're going to have the support of everybody within the administration, including potentially the military. Why would they hand it over to a mob of crazy MAGA incompetence? Why not do the job right? Anyway, it's scary stuff. Legit scary stuff.